Good morning, Minneapolis. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate having you here so much. Thank you so much. This is Good Morning Minneapolis, brought to you by Onsite Public Media. I am your host, Toussaint Morrison. To become a member, to keep shows like this going, you can become a member in the link below and help us out. We have so many more shows coming to you, and we appreciate you being here. Thank you. In obvious news today, there is a rugby team in St. Paul called the St. Paul Jazz Pigs, proving true that not all pigs in St. Paul are bad. Today in our headlines, we are going to speak about what's happening on the north side of Minneapolis. Within the span of 2 weeks, 3 children were struck by stray bullets. That is 10-year-old Ladavian Garrett Jr., 9-year-old Trinity Ottoson-Smith, and 6-year-old Anaya Allen. While Ladavian and Trinity are still in the hospital being treated for their wounds, Anaya Allen passed away 2 days after suffering injuries from the shooting. So, 3 children struck by stray bullets on the north side of Minneapolis, 2 in the hospital, 1 dead, an entire family and community in grieving and trauma, and an entire family and community demanding answers for who is responsible for the shootings, and elected officials rushing to figure out answers to a situation that has been berating communities on the north side of Minneapolis for decades. It's paramount to start at the tragic loss of Anaya Allen and the fact that her life was lost due to senseless gun violence in her own community. So the question is, how do we ensure that this never happens again? Mayor Fry presented a solution saying this: "We must come together with an unrelenting commitment to preventative work, stopping the gun violence, and bringing the perpetrators to justice. Both Chief Arredondo and Director Cotton, 2 of this country's foremost experts in their field, have my complete support in securing the resources they need for the hard work ahead." And that's an option. And one can maybe boil down what Fry was saying, that the answer is more cops. That is an option, but let's map out some other solutions as well. But maybe to get a better view on what's happening on the north side of Minneapolis, let's zoom out and see what's happening in the United States. Gun violence, which is a phrase that we'll challenge a little bit later on, is something that permeates this entire country. It is part of this country's history. And so to get a better look at north side of Minneapolis, let's take a look at the entire country and its relationship to gun violence. In 2019, according to the BBC, there were 38,355 gun deaths in the United States. However, 23,941 of those gun deaths were suicides. That means 62% of the gun deaths in 2019 in the United States were related to mental health issues. Again, we're coming back to correlating effects. Death by gun doesn't just happen in a vacuum. We're just going into some of the effects that are the impetus and core reasons that are driving gun violence in the United States. That's gun violence in America. Let's talk about the racial aspect. You've probably heard the phrase black on black violence, and we're hearing the phrase being used in correlation with what's going on in the north side of Minneapolis, and it's been used a lot in black communities, in said black side of town, and in black neighborhoods. However, are black communities the only communities that experience intraracial violence? The reporting on that is unique, and this may be why. Jamila Nasheed writes, "A report released by the U.S. Department of Justice in 2017 found that of all the violent crimes committed between 2012 and 2015, 22.7% were committed by black people, and 63% of those were committed against other black people. This is in comparison to 44% of all violent crimes committed by white people, 57% of which were committed against other white people. According to this data, white people commit crimes against other white people at about the same rate that black people do against other black people. But despite these numbers, people aren't discussing the white-on-white crime problem. When a white person commits a crime against another white person, it's just called a crime. Race isn't a factor, and that's intentional." The crime report picks up on this to add, among Hispanic victims, 40% of violent victimizations were committed by Hispanic offenders, 20% by white offenders, and 20% by black offenders. So, our takeaway is that black communities are disproportionately reported, highlighted, and headlined to have violence within their communities, when intraracial violence is something that is happening in the majority of all communities. So, when white-on-white crimes happen, why isn't it reported as white-on-white? And why is it just reported as crime? Well, as Jamila said, it's intentional. Think about that. So, what we're seeing is that most gun violence is correlated with mental health, and that the majority of violence happens within a community and is majority intraracial. So let's figure out the specific place that it happened, especially in Minneapolis, so we can figure out a solution to ensure that this never happens again. Historically, the north side of Minneapolis has been populated by African Americans since the early 1900s. And this wasn't by choice, this is by what was available. Social agencies and community organizations and just resources weren't available to black people as much as they were to white people. So, in the case of many cities, black people went where they were allowed to go or where they were pushed into. For example, in 1924, the Phyllis Wheatley Settlement House was established as a recreation center for black children. Therefore, you would see black community build around places where black people were allowed to, or again, pushed into. So when we look at that, it's not just specific to Minneapolis. This happens all over the country. When you look at different cities where black people were only allowed or pushed into, such as the south side of Chicago, Gary, Indiana, North Philadelphia, Overtown in Miami, which was originally called Colored Town, even Rondo, where black people lived and built community, but was then destroyed by the city of St. Paul for a highway. We could go on for days about the origins of black neighborhoods in America. However, what we're getting at is the economics correlated with gun violence in these neighborhoods. So let's take a look at what the economic status is of neighborhoods on the north side of Minneapolis. On the north side of Minneapolis, the average property value of Jordan is $200,000. Hawthorne, $205,000, Falwell, $195,700, Weber Camden, $193,950, Willard Hay, $230,000, McKinley, $185,000. Compared to its Southside counterpart, which is over double these figures, Lowry Hill, hello Lisa Bender, $462,000. East Calhoun, racist name, $545,000. Linden Hills, $530,000. Fulton, $524,950. Lyndhurst, $585,000. And Kenwood, a whopping $1,080,000 as an average property value. Contextually, the north side of Minneapolis averages less than half of the property value of its south side counterpart and also holds some of the lowest average property value in the city of Minneapolis. Jamila writes, with the clear connection between poverty and crime rates and the fact that the poverty rate for black Americans, 20.8% in 2018, is more than twice the poverty rate for white Americans, 8.1%, it's obvious that anyone who truly cares about lowering the crime rate in the US would spend their time and resources working to eradicate poverty. To add to that, the U.S. Department of Justice illustrates that between 2008 and 2012, violence in poor households is more than double violence in high-income households. So, when we're looking at correlated effects with gun violence, and we didn't even go into weather, that as the temperature rises, so do crime rates. What we found is that gun violence is deeply rooted in mental health and economics. So instead of Mayor Frye's plan to basically add more cops, could we say that we should add more, community centers, resources for children, youth programs, art programs, after-school educational programs, maybe all the amenities that youth have in Lyndhurst and Kenwood. One man in Philadelphia even found a means to reduce gun violence in his neighborhood by doing this.
I recognize that in addition to doing a voter registration drive that year, we needed to do a license to carry drive by inviting people in my community to be safe and responsible gun owners. That year, we hosted our first class in North Philadelphia, where I'm from, expecting 35 people. Instead, 350 showed up to learn. Guns are a taboo topic in urban America, therefore safety training has purposely been withheld in our communities, and the homicide rates are a direct reflection of that ignorance. That year we started Black Guns Matter. Philadelphia saw the lowest firearm-related deaths it had since 1979.
That's Maj Toure, who implemented gun safety and training classes in his home neighborhood on the north side of Philadelphia and saw the homicide rates drastically reduce. This conversation isn't without you. What do you believe is a viable solution to ending gun violence? What is a solution to ending gun violence in impoverished communities? What do you think should be added and what should we be focusing on? Or do you agree with Mayor Frye and believe that we should just add more cops? Leave a comment in the comment section below and we'll definitely keep this conversation going. In other news, if you've pulled up to the bar at PD Patty's in Stillwater, Minnesota, and you're looking to order the Pete Orpit Pale White Ale, well, it's tapped out. Yes, Pete Orpit, the Washington County attorney, has handed over the case of killer cop Kim Potter to Keith Ellison. You know what? It is a lovely day when an old white lawyer basically says, hey, I don't know how to process white supremacy manifesting into police brutality. Get these facts out of my face and give this job to a black man who's better suited than me. So, the heat is on for Keith Ellison to bring new charges, murder charges, to killer cop Kim Potter. And how did this happen? How did it get to this point that Pete Orpit just said, well, get this out of my face. I don't want to deal with this case. Maybe if we're going to give credit where credit is due, we can give it to community leader and activist Nikema Levy-Armstrong, who led several protests out to Pete Orpit's house in Stillwater, Minnesota, to demand that Pete bring murder charges to killer cop Kim Potter. The protests led to Pete Orpit's neighbors coming out in caucasus racist tirades and them both equally losing their jobs at Fantastic Sam's and the Stillwater Department of Corrections. Yes, you heard that correctly. Paul Gorder. The old Paul Gorder. Last we spoke about him, he was put on administrative leave from the Stillwater Department of Corrections. And after his caucasus racist tirade, he's been told to leave. Which begs the question, are they really racist unless they're caught on camera? Yes. So, Keith Ellison got a new high-profile case. Usually when somebody gets you a new high-profile job, you thank them. So Keith, we hope that you've reached out to Nikema by now. And if you haven't, do it today. Well, Bogart's doesn't open up until 7 a.m., but somebody decided to start making the donuts early on Lyndale and Lake.
Oh my God, no! No! Did you see that? Did you see that? Did you see that?
This is a scene from Sunday, May 23rd outside of Lyndale and Lake, where over 150 people gathered to watch cars do donuts in the center of the intersection. Unfortunately for one person, they were struck by a car while it was drifting. Eyewitness reports say that the intersection was held for almost an hour, from 2:15 a.m. and on, and that it took police 40 minutes to show up to break up what was happening at Lyndale and Lake. Now, the 5th Precinct is approximately less than a mile from Lyndale and Lake. 40 minutes, less than a mile. So if you've ran that 18-minute mile and you're really beating yourself up about it, don't worry, you're faster than the cops. Also, if you feel that you can walk or run a mile in less than 40 minutes, well, you may be overqualified to be a Minneapolis police officer. That'll do it for us today here at Onsite Public Media. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please become a member in the link below. We're going to be doing some new things, and this is the second to last show for Good Morning Minneapolis that we'll be doing here. So it's going to be a sad goodbye, but this is the second to the last one. You'll get one more after this. We love y'all. If you have any stories that you want us to cover, email us at onsitepublicmedia@gmail.com. Our work is never done. We'll see you in the next one.